Man, welcome back to another episode of Man versus Marriage. It is I, your humble servant, the Q Diggity Dog, in the Moran family studio with my lovely wife, Jeannie Moran. Jeannie, tell the people who you are and what you do.
I'm your wife. This is what I do. I take care of the kids and the house and all the things.
You're much more than my wife and the woman who takes care of our kids and our family. But hey, it's your opportunity to tell people who you are and what you do, and you have done so. So, if you are just joining us for the first time, number one, I want to say thank you very much. And number two, we are absolutely going to get to the title of this program. And I think it's important you know that I decided as we were getting ready to prepare for it that Jeannie and I would have an open discussion so that we can help you understand how to have this conversation with your spouse. Because chances are, if you are at a program called Man versus Marriage and you look over the titles, your marriage is probably not where you want it to be. Fair to say?
Sure.
She's indifferent about it, and that's okay. I know for us, if you're new to the program, I'll introduce you to the people that you are listening to or that you are looking at. And we 25 years ago said I do in the year of 1999. That's pretty incredible. So we got married and we wanted to have kids. We both wanted a family, period. We wanted a family. We knew that going into it. So when we started to try to have kids, we were both told that it was likely, Jeannie was told she's likely not be able to get pregnant. And then I took a test to see if it was me. And they told me that I was not able to father children. And they called back 30 minutes later and said, I'm sorry that we read the wrong test. So it was a very tumultuous 30 minutes. And subsequently, there's been some tumultuousness. I don't know what that word would be. Since then, as I think back, that maybe another guy got a call and said that he could father children, and they had to call him back and deliver some bad news. So whoever that guy is out there, if they called you, my heart goes out to you, and I'm sorry for the roller coaster. With that being said, not only did we have kids, we had a bunch of kids. We have a son, we have triplet daughters, we have a single daughter, we have twin daughters, and then one more singleton to round out the great 8 known as the Moran clan. And during that time, the first 10 years of our marriage, man, we got to the point where, and probably every young marriage to a degree, will face this, but we just got to the point where we were no longer living life. Life was living us. And here are some things that contributed to that experience during our life, which was, number one, having a child, period. That's enough to, upset the apple cart. Number two, having multiples and them starting their life on life support. That was very difficult. And then trying to figure out how to feed everybody, not from a financial standpoint, although that was happening, but just a scheduling standpoint. How do you feed triplets?
Every
really
hour
weird.
and a half.
Yeah, really, really odd. And then came the financial duress. We were losing our home. We were having to eat from a food bank at our local church. Thank God they were available to help us. And then the information came. We were made aware that our children were being molested by babysitters. And then there were countless, I would say during that time, approximately 25 plus, including both girls. We had some crazy medical emergencies going on where our daughters had VP shunts and they were seizing and having brain surgeries. And it was just like I said, a tumultuous time. And so life was giving us all we could handle. And we were in full survival mode. And our marriage was not what we signed up for. We did a couple of personal development classes, which is something I didn't even know existed. And we kind of took a step back and was like, this is not the relationship we signed up for. We had in our mind that this was going to be something much bigger, much greater than where we were. And so we got some counseling, we got some coaching, and that dramatically changed our life. It changed our relationship as a whole. It changed the course of our family and for the better. And, I'll let you know this, just because we have a podcast doesn't mean we have a perfect marriage. Um, per se, we still go through various challenges, and all the challenges that we face, we bring here to you on this show. So if you can relate to any of those things happening, maybe it's not necessarily that you have multiples, but you've had, very challenging situations in your life and your relationship, and it's caused some strife, it's caused some distance, um, it's caused some challenges in your relationship with your spouse, then you're in the right place, because Jeannie and I are living proof that if you are willing to face yourself, if you are willing to change yourself, if you're willing to reconcile, then you can have the relationship that you want. Any thoughts on that?
Not really. It's our usual story. It's who we are. It's what we've done. Where we're at.
Okay. Well, with that, we want to make sure that you know that you can actually reach out to us directly. And the easiest way to do that is just our email address, Quincy@mvsmpodcast.com. It's really the easiest way, because I get those emails coming through, and then we are able to talk back and forth about what's going on in your life, and then ultimately at some point um, it just might end up being turned into a phone call, and maybe like a group session where we talk about what's going on, and what we can do to help you achieve those goals in your relationship. And today, if you clicked on this, it's about achieving unity in your relationship. So, number one, thank you for being here. Number two, let's do this thing. Um, lastly, I'll let you know before we get into it that if the show has made a positive impact on your life, or it does after this particular episode, go check out quincymoran.com/apparel, where you can get the latest drop of swag or clothing. We got t-shirts. How about that? We have t-shirts that will help you go out and represent. And in my opinion, people are still reading t-shirts everywhere you go. Somebody's got a message to put out there, and you never know whose life you can affect in a positive way if you are wearing our gear out in the streets. So here's the flagship Man versus Marriage, the podcast. Here is one that I'm very excited about. It is not born ready, built ready. And this one is the Family Famous line, which is what we will be bringing to you all. I'm looking forward in 2025. And then just a really cool shirt called Hustle Mania, the notorious Hustle Mania, aka the Q Dog. So with that, let's get into this, honey. Answer the question at 9 minutes and 49 seconds into this. What does a unified relationship look like? Just off the cuff. It's all open discussion. So tell me what your thoughts on that are.
I would say two people who are on the same page, who communicate well. They have the same core values. They understand each other's love language. They balance each other. Their intimacy is on point. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. How about when you say you do make a mistake or there is a misunderstanding? How about the ability to hear one another out and not take it personal, and be willing to forgive and then let that thing go?
I classify that under communication, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm working on getting a little more granular there. I would agree. And I would also add maybe a couple things to that. And one of the things I would add would be, is there any joy or excitement present in their relationship?
Yeah, you have to have fun.
There's got to be fun in marriage. although you're here at a marriage improvement podcast, um, we can't always be so focused on what's going wrong. It's important to take a step back and look at the things that are going right. And you may say in your mind, nothing's going right in my relationship. Well, that might be true. But how objective are you when it comes to looking at your relationship? So, we have had a significant amount of challenges throughout the course of our 25-year marriage. We had some challenges before we got married. Like we almost didn't get married because of religion, which was very interesting. So, but as I go back, and this is something that I advise everyone to do when we start speaking on a personal level, is I want you to go back and think about why you married your spouse. Maybe I can put Jeannie on the spot here and ask her why. What's one or two reasons why you decided to marry me?
You make me laugh. That's one of my favorite parts. You always make me laugh. Even when I don't want to, you make me laugh. But mostly it was because we had so much in common and so many similar goals in life. It just felt like you were my person.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And I enjoy, and it's funny because, no pun intended, whenever I make you laugh these days, like authentically make you laugh, it surprises me that I can still do that after so many years. I mean,
that you can still be a goober and I would giggle at you. That surprises you?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I figured by now I don't really have any new material. So
you don't need new material. You really don't. You have about 28 voices that live in that head and they all just show up when they want to. Trust me, you've got a rotating video playing up there. We're good. We got enough.
Well, and I'll talk to you about the reasons that I married you. One of them is because there is this like rebellious streak in you. And I looked at it and said, I could never live that out loud, but maybe if we get together and we have a relationship, I could learn how to do that. Because I kept everything for me had to be in a particular order. Like I needed to present myself as someone who had their crap together. And if I was struggling, I didn't want to put my pain on other people. I felt like I could just take it all and then really had no outlet for where to give it. But that I had to be like everybody had their expectation of me. Mm-hmm. Whereas I looked at you and you were like, you're just living out loud. Your relationship with God was very attractive to me because you talk to him more like a companion and a friend and a dad as opposed to just God. And I was like, I never heard anybody say that God would put a 2x4 upside their head or something like that. And it used to irritate me because I'm like, that's not God.
Well, I mean, it's metaphorically speaking, of course, but
well, yeah,
there were things that, things happen and I'm not paying attention or I'm not listening when I'm supposed to. It's like getting hit in the head with a 2x4.
Yep. And then there was this piece, one of the other very attractive pieces of this is that you presented as a very tough, intimidating individual, which beautiful women can be. But somehow I saw through that and I could see your heart and how hard you love and how loyal you are. And I kind of saw that on the first night because we had so much in common that we had worked, at the same place and you knew the same people. But then beyond that, after we got done making jokes about the place and the people, beyond that, we started to talk about how important our faith was to us, how important family, having a family someday was to us. We talked about our love for fishing, which we don't do, which needs to be rectified.
Let's get a few people out of the house and some space first.
You know what? Life is too short. We got to get over that. We don't need space to carry fish. They're small.
We need space to store the crap to fish with.
No, we get it. And then sports. We both really liked sports. And so those things were kind of what brought me to you. And we both wanted a relationship. And, you know, I just look at those things and go back to those and I say, okay, is there joy still present in our relationship? And before, I know when we were going through tough times that, there were still times of laughter and whatnot. But I would say that joy and connection now, as we've moved forward through the coaching process, is much more present and available to us because we've been intentional about it. And that's not something that I really knew about in my younger years. But that's where I look at this and I go, okay. And the reason I asked you to share that, and I'm sharing that, is because it's important to remember why you said your vows. So if you're struggling right now with unity in your relationship, I think it's very important for you both to do an exercise and go back down memory lane and talk about, why did we get married? Why did we start this relationship? What was it about us that we loved so much? Because it's only after that you can start to look within and see, where did we begin losing that? Because then you can come back to present day and you can say, okay, well, this is what we want. Because if you don't know what you want in your relationship and you've allowed life to just have its way with you, and the cares and the concerns and the distractions of this life have now become more present than your relationship, it's simply about putting a vision together for your relationship and identifying, what do we love about each other? And after you identify what did we love about each other, how can we bring those things back? And then what do we want to add to that? And how can you be unified if you're not both working towards the same goal, if you're not working towards the same vision? Because like right now, you might, like for you and I, we talked about this in some recent episodes. Your idea is that I didn't want to be home. And that's why I was out working so much and chasing all these other avenues, whether it was for fame or for fortune. You thought those were like mechanisms for me not to spend time at home. And what I wanted to do was get one of these things to take off so that we could be more financially stable and I could spend more time at home. And what drove that is the anxiety that you would feel, or the concern that you would feel, when we didn't have enough groceries or we couldn't pay the bills. So you wanted more of a sure foot when it came to provision. I wanted to be home more and to like help build and grow our family. But we were both operating out of a place of fear, which in reality we had in some odd way, we had the same goal. We were just not taking the path to get there. Like we were taking the opposite road. And so it's important, like we did in the beginning, is you start to identify the areas that are stealing what it is you want. And some of those things can be Do you have any idea what some of those things can be? Because I'm doing a whole lot of talking here. I want to make sure that people hear from you as well.
The things that can steal away from what it is you want.
Yeah.
Well, for us, it was, well, at the time when we had smaller kids, you wanted to spend more time with the kids, but then you kept piling things onto your schedule. So you didn't get to spend time with the kids. And for me, I needed the cupboards to be filled, but I also needed you to be home because it felt like I was carrying a lot of the weight. And but in order for the cabinets to be filled, you had to work and you had to be gone a lot. And in order for the kids to be cared for, I had to be available because you weren't available. Um, and I think we let our circumstances kind of direct what we were doing because we had the medical stuff, we had I mean, just medical stuff alone, it wasn't even, if you don't count just the financial side of it. At one point, we had Hunter at my mom's house during the day while you worked. I had 2 babies in a NICU in one town, the other baby in a NICU an hour away. And then I was going from NICU 1, feeding these 2, dropping off any milk that I had from the night before, driving down to the other one. By the time I got down to see her, I had replenished and it was time to feed her, put her down, drive to my grandparents' house, set a clock so that I was pumping every hour, an hour and a half to keep everything going, leaving, going to see her the next morning, leaving milk with her, feeding her, getting on the road, coming back up, going to feed the other 2, visiting them for a little bit, driving home to go see you and Hunter, driving back to the hospital the next morning, feeding those 2, dropping off whatever I had overnight, and going back. We did that for a good solid, 2 weeks, I think, the first time.
Yeah, it could be. You talk about when Hannah had to go and have
her
the
first
shunt
surgery, yeah.
installed.
And that turned into actually 2 surgeries, which led us to the same scenario, only the 2 that were originally in NICU were home now. So now we had to rotate my mom helping babysit 3 kids while you were in between jobs and I was driving back and forth. I mean, that was just one small chunk of time in the beginning of our marriage. And then Ashlyn came along. We finally got everybody home, and then Ashlyn came along. That scared the hell out of everybody because not that we didn't want her, it was just the timing was not what we had planned. She came out of nowhere, and it was one of those things where, I mean, truth be told, we hadn't had sex in 7 months. The one time we did, boom, we're pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Now what? Now we've got this itty bitty house, and instead of 3 girls in a room and a boy in a room, now we have another one coming, and not enough room, and not enough finances, and not enough hands, and um, that's just the beginning part of it. I mean, moving into different houses, having people molest the kids, finding out my dad had cancer, not being able to go take care of him or help my mom in any way, which is a huge thing for both of us, being able to get to our parents when we need to. Um, all of those things basically just hammered in fear.
True.
And that's I think where a lot of our situations came from, because it was always the fear of what's coming next. Because it just seemed like from the moment we found out we were having triplets, I mean, I was hospitalized a week later.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just one kick after the next for a good solid 5 years at least. And just pregnancies and sickness and bills and family coming at us because, stop having kids, and just outside things kind of kicking our ass. And I don't think we were both scared of different things, but we never learned how to talk about it.
Exactly.
We never learned how to process through the situation. I mean, by the time we got to Rita, we were 10 years in. Mo was about to be born or had just been born. And when we started talking about different things, one of the things that caught us both off guard was, well, did you guys talk through that? Like, did you process through your emotions and what you felt and what you were going through and, just let everything out, as you would say, let the air out of the balloon? And both of us looked at each other like, what do you mean?
Is that a thing?
we were both in a position of no, because all we'd ever known from our own families, I mean, your dad is a perfect example with how poor you grew up. He didn't care what the job was. He was just going to take the job because he needed to put food on the table and he needed to pay the bills. So whatever the job was, he did it. And it was kind of the same thing for us. Whatever had to be done had to be done. We just had to make sure that we stayed above float. And but what we forgot was in the middle of all that, we're married. So I think we trudged through a lot of things as individuals living in the same house, taking care of the same people, but not on the same page.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And what I'll say, to sum that up, maybe like you're listening to this and you're going, well, that really hasn't happened to me. That hasn't happened to me. So I can't really put my finger on where this distance has grown and why we're not unified anymore. And here's what I would say is that there's something very interesting about something called resentment, because resentment will divide you and your spouse. Jeannie and I both wanted the same thing at that time, but every time she would complain about there not being enough money for the bills or there not being enough food for us to eat, I took that as you're telling me I'm not enough.
Well, and the not funny haha, but funny side of that is the more you got to go out, the more I resented you because I had no adult interaction. I mean, my breather was to go to Walmart and go grocery shopping, which on average was a 3-hour trip.
Yeah.
And that was my getaway. If I didn't have to take the kids and I could go shopping, I took my sweet ass time walking down those aisles. I didn't even care. Just to have, I mean, I could people watch. There were actually people and they weren't just little people yelling at me or needing something. And I used to get frustrated because everywhere we went, everybody was, "Hey, Quincy." And then I'm the mom. And I just didn't feel like I was part of anything anymore. Like I was married to you, but I wasn't a part of anything anymore.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is I was still trying to find my way in my career. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I was working my butt off to do something and I was not happy in my work. And so I looked at you and it's like, you talked about this is all you ever wanted. So you have your dream job. And and I was like, I don't have that. I have to leave the house. I would, I'd much rather, know how to do it. I'd much rather be here, with you, with the kids and doing these lessons and activities and, teaching them and taking them outside and, just doing stuff as opposed to going to something every day that just seemed to pull me farther and farther away from my family. So I did have some resentment towards you because you would complain about it. And I'm like, how it didn't compute to me that you could complain about having your dream job. And so what that did for us is it started to cause distance. And what resentment can do is make you believe that you're alone in something. And when you're alone in something, you start getting disconnected because somebody's actions can be pure, but you feel like you've done me wrong. You feel like there's no connection. You feel like I have to do all this on my own. So you're not here to help me anymore. You are more of my problem. And you are adding to my issues. And you are hurting me because you're not meeting my needs. When both of you can have the best intentions, you're just not executing because you have allowed life You've allowed life to really take over what it is you're doing. And a lot of the things you're talking about, that we didn't know to do, we just did not know because you
No, and
don't.
we had nobody to help. I mean, our parents and grandparents looked at us like we were nuts because no one had triplets in our family. How do you do 3 babies? Everybody's concern was, how do we afford it? Our concern was, how do we freaking sleep? Like, how do I was a human cow, thank God, because we couldn't have afforded all the food that they needed to have when they were first born. We were
Well,
supplementing, but
we did have a lot of help in that regard,
we
like
we
diapers
did,
and things of that nature.
but that's what I'm saying though. The help came in supply. We had diapers for a year because the church did a like a donation thing for us. We had the formula that we needed because we were on the WIP program, and thank God we qualified at that time, because God knows we didn't the next time. But I was still nursing 3 babies every 30 minutes and handling an 18-month-old who had just figured out how to walk and who was just starting to babble a little bit. And we were trying to figure out where we were going to live because where we were was not working. It was too small. There were just all these different factors going on. And the hardest one was, who do you ask for help? And not just to come and help take care of the kids, but when you have questions about how you do things and what this looks like. No one in our family had ever had a shunt. Nobody knew what we were dealing with. And everybody had answers based on, what this doctor's TV program said, or, Dr. Phil and his great advice, or whatever the hell else they had going on. But no one had ever been in our shoes.
No one we knew.
No, nobody that we knew. We found a support group that was for multiples, and it helped for a minute. And then it just came with a really negative connotation about having multiples and what you're going to have to go through and all these different.
It was the same thing with autism when we found that out.
The first couple of meetings that we went to for the support groups that we were told were supposed to help us just felt like they inundated us with the negatives that we're about to face, as opposed to the things that we really needed to know. Like, I'm grateful that we did the autism one and they told me about the education stuff, because it prompted me to start looking very quickly at what was available, what we needed, where could we go. But again, that took away from our experience and our time together, because when you were home and it was time for us to lay down and relax, I was on a computer researching because that was the only quiet time I had.
Yeah, and YouTube and things of that nature weren't as prominent now, but really that time to me was just a blur. So whatever it was they were talking about, I was taking in none of it. Like I know they were talking, we got together with Taka and they were talking about, the gluten, the casein, the water, and,
it
things
was overwhelming. The amount of information we got and the amount of changes that it wasn't a suggestion. It was like, you need to do this, 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 and this. And when you're first coming out of the gate with this stuff, it feels so overwhelming to be like, oh my God, how do we do this? And then when we found out the cost of all these different treatments and all these things, because our insurance doesn't cover it. At the time, autism hadn't even been on the insurance for anything. And so we were just like, oh my God. I mean, that I remember that first meeting, you and I both walked out of there and your panic was, how are we ever going to afford this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how could we possibly get him to this specialist and get all these things cleaned out of his system and be able to afford it when they're cash only? It's $150 just to go see them, plus whatever the cost of whatever treatments they give you or whatever supplements they give you. And no, you can't buy them from Whole Foods. You have to buy them from this person. And by the time we started looking at the numbers and all of the information, both of us were just like, this is just not, we just can't do this. There's no way. So we made minor adjustments that we could control. We took them off of gluten, which did make a difference. We backed down their sugar, which did make a difference. We backed down dairy It helps sometimes. We started finding our own solutions, but again, we were just going through the paces of life, trying to find answers to level out anything so that we could have a breather.
Yeah. And then it would come out later. We had 3 kids diagnosed with autism, our 3 oldest. But then it would come out later in our relationship that you were holding yourself responsible. And I think you thought that I was holding you responsible for the triplets, which hadn't crossed my mind. I mean, when we were in there, I'm pushing on you, just go one more day, just go one more day, just go one more day, and it's
He's
odd.
talking about when I was pregnant and in the hospital.
Yeah. Just go one more day. And finally, when it was like, I'm done. I had to take a step back and go, she's been in this room for 6 weeks, no windows, no nothing. Thank God for family members that, my Aunt Donna, who would come in and decorate your room and Thanksgiving, or, make it, spruce it up to make it look like Christmas, like put some holiday cheer in there.
That was the absolute worst, was being stuck in there for the holidays, because I am such a tradition person. That's what feeds me a lot of the time with our family time. So being in there and not being able to go to either. And it's funny because, when you first get married, you're like, whose house do we go to for Thanksgiving this year? What time are we going? How can we split the time? It's always that back and forth. I didn't even care which house I went to. I just wanted to get the hell out of there and go see some people. I couldn't even get up to go take a shower. They tried. I had a nurse come and put me in a wheelchair, wheeled me in. They had a special shower. I was going to be able to sit on a bench. She was going to help me bathe in there, and then we were going to bring me back. I got in. I got one shower out of the 6 weeks I was there. We got in. We got me cleaned up. She put me in the wheelchair. We brought me back. They put my monitors back on, and my contractions went haywire. I had no clue because I'm so stretched out. I can't feel what's happening. I can feel the tension, but I can't actually feel all of the stuff until they got big enough and started taking up my rib cage and things of that nature, where it was like, oh my God, now I feel every little bit. But at the time, I was 20 weeks. I was just over 21 weeks when we got put in the hospital. And the stupidity of it is I just wanted to go out to dinner for our anniversary. That's what put me into labor. I wanted to go out to dinner for our anniversary. I didn't care about anything else. We don't have to do anything else, but I need to get out. I need to get out of my bed. And because we had a hospital bed in the house.
Yeah.
And I was sleeping in my living room in a hospital bed where Bubba could climb up and snuggle with me and watch cartoons, and people would come and help, give him his lunch and that kind of thing. But I was pretty much bedbound. Other than going to the bathroom and getting something to eat, I was bedbound. And once we got into the hospital, it was like I couldn't go to Thanksgiving. He was gone all day to see the family because he had our son, and everybody wants to see everybody for Thanksgiving. He brought Hunter up to see me for a little bit. And I got to watch him walk, which was really cool because he was just figuring it out. And by the time he was up at the hospital, he was all over the place, climbing on crap, and he was not happy. We had to keep covering my arm because he didn't like my owies. He kept trying to take them off.
Yeah, he didn't crawl. He rolled.
Yeah, he never crawled. He rolled to wherever he wanted, and then he got up and started walking. Like he shifted gears, and that's part of why his brain didn't develop properly, is because that is a huge part, which we didn't know until later, but that is a huge part of their development that we lost because we didn't force it. But the long and short of it was, then it was getting close to Christmas time, and my emotional state was not great. I had been in there going on my 6th week. I had people would come in. The sad part is I was the room when you first come into OBGYN. So I heard everybody coming in and I heard everybody leaving with a crying baby. And I was right there for all of it. I watched them go past my door. I was allowed to have my door open, but that was the only scenery that I got. And most of the time when there were a lot of people coming in delivery, the nurse would come and close my door because they didn't want to upset me. And it sucked because here I am. I can't go nowhere. I could talk to people on the phone, but that was the gist of what I had. And when it came close to time for the girls to be born, I knew they were coming. I knew in my gut, we're done. We're just done. The doctors had been giving me all kinds of meds. They've been pushing. There was another round that they could give me, but when the doctor started explaining possible side effects and things that could happen to the baby, I did one last bolus. I did one last shot of tributaline because they were giving me the injections for the lungs. And I told them, after the injections for the lungs and the time that passes for that to develop, if we can't get this under control, I'm not going to make it. And I remember the next morning they were getting ready to give me another bolus, and I told Quincy, no more, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And what it boiled down to was my mental capacity was fragile, very fragile at that point. And, people kept coming in, and you get well, if they're born at this stage, here's all the bad news. And then you have this little tiny sliver of what could go right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was holding on to that little tiny sliver with everything I had. But I just could not physically keep them in anymore. I was at the point where I was hurting now. And no matter what they did to try and keep me from being in pain, there's certain things you can't take. There's certain things you can't do. The amount of medication that they flooded my system with for the amount of time that I was in the hospital has been linked to autism and other birth defects. So I carried that guilt with me because my body just wasn't designed to carry 3 kids. I was 115 pounds, for God's sake, 5'4" and 115 pounds. I was not made to carry 3 babies, but God decided, hold my beer. We're going to do this anyway. So, but I had to at some point trust that he would do the rest of it. But when we got out of there, I never really talked about it. I kept it to myself. So when we did that marriage thing, and it was, what are things, I forgot what it was. Is there anything that we were resenting, or what was the question? I forgot what it was.
I don't know. I just remember the answer, and it's nothing like it hadn't crossed my mind that, like I didn't blame you for the medical issues that the girls had. It wasn't even on my, it wasn't on my radar at all.
Well, I blamed me because when Bubba was born, Bubba was 6 weeks early. Similar scenario, but not quite. I started going into preterm labor at 20 weeks. My body just did not want to take on the extra weight and the stress of a baby. And so I was on meds. I went on bed rest. I was home for that one, but I kept going in and out of labor. I mean, I was in labor for 3 days with that kid. And by the time he finally graced us with his presence, he was coming out the wrong way. He was turned upside down, and not feet first, but his head was turned the wrong direction. So they were pulling him out and scraping his face on my pelvic bone. He came out shaped like a cone head because he was stuck in one position for too long. And then he came out with microtia of the ear. So he's missing half of his ear. And that was one of the things that I held against myself, was my body just was not prepared, because it kept fighting him, kept trying to get him out. And I kept going into labor. And then he came out, and they said for sure he was hard of hearing, and it took both of us, I think, a little bit of time to kind of wrap around the fact that he may not hear. He may be deaf. We don't really know. We know what the test in the hospital registered, but because he was so small, you're going off of a brainwave. You're not going off of a child being able to speak and tell you, yeah, I hear that.
Mm-hmm.
And both of us were just not sure. I mean, it's baby number 1. So both of us were like, oh my God, okay. Life just completely turned the boat to 360. And now we're going, who's driving? Who's driving? Because we were driving great, and now I don't know who's driving anymore. And then when we had the triplets, it was just kind of like, damn, that's twice. That's twice that my body's failed me on this. It's twice that I've had kids come out with issues and come out early because I can't hold up my end of things. But I felt guilty because it's my body. In my mind, that was my failure. I kept going over, were there things that I could have done to make the pregnancy easier? Were there things that I could have done to make it healthier? Were there things I could have done that might have progressed the babies a little bit faster? I mean, I beat myself up for a while, but and I went through it every single time we had to go to the hospital. I went through that same cycle, because if it hadn't been for me, if it hadn't been for the pregnancy, if it hadn't been for this wouldn't be happening. And so when we went to that meeting and that came up, I wasn't sure if you were holding me accountable for that the same way I was. And I kept thinking, man, if he blames me for this, I don't know how we get past that.
Yeah.
I can't fix it. It's not really anything that I purposely did, but I took a lot of guilt on for that.
Yeah. And that's why I felt like it was important for you to tell that part of the story, because whether it's, the man or the woman in the relationship, they can be holding on to something in silence that's building resentment, even if it's towards yourself. And also, if you feel like maybe your spouse is blaming you for that, you can start to build resentment towards your spouse.
You start to respond out of it. You start to automatically, everything is on the defense. Everything's on the defense.
Just knowing that, and look, it's likely that you listening to the program don't have these same situations, but how can you just take a step back after hearing this small part of our journey and looking at where the gaps might have been created in your relationship, because that is what adversely affects your marriage and relationship being unified, because now you feel like you're having to go on this road on your own. And the more resentment fills you, the wider the gap gets between you. Here's the other ugly truth that I've come to find is the longer that resentment is harbored in you, it starts to transform into bitterness. And bitterness can affect you. It's almost like a chemical gets released in you, and now you're bitter, and that can affect your health. So it's very important for you to take these practical steps. And what is that? Number one, go back to the beginning. Why did you marry your spouse? And then number two, look at your relationship now and see, is that present? If it's not, then you know where you've gone wrong. You know where you've gotten off the path, the both of you. Now, maybe both of you are different. So what you wanted in the beginning, you may not want now. And that's why I encourage you on step 3 or on phase 3, which is get together and decide what you guys want. What is it that you want in your relationship? Because unless you both know what target you're aiming for, you're never going to be unified. And it's incredibly important that you guys do these steps together in order to unify your relationship, because now you're all rowing the boat in the same direction. And there can be various things outside of medical, children, etc. And look, I look back at it and I go, we were really young, very low 20s when this all happened. And I didn't really know how to raise one kid. I just didn't know. And I don't know what advice I would have taken at that time, because I was so black and white, so concrete, so hard-headed, And then there were times during the process, through the whole autism and what it looks like, and I'm trying to get like Hunter's first at bat. He loves baseball. His very first at bat, he takes a swing at the ball, hits it, ball foul tips, hits him right between the eyes. And he goes from a kid who stands in and swings the bat to a kid who's running from the ball. And then it affected his ability to catch. And I so badly wanted him to get over it that I would hold him steady and make him, and he would scream and he would yell, And I had a family member that I was having, help me with him in that situation. And, we were done. He'd come up to me. He's like, "Hey, don't F up your kid." And I'm like, whoa. Obviously, that must mean that you think I have effed my kid up. But I can't tell you what autism is about and how that affects what it is that we're doing. And so there are words that can come from the outside that can cause disunity in your relationship as well. And like Jeannie said, those experiences are things that you guys definitely need to sit and talk about to better understand how that affected your spouse. Like when you go through things like this.
You've got to do an inventory, because had we had check-ins back then, that would have been game changer.
Yeah.
Because the effects of everything we went through with the pregnancies, that's when I started to lose part of myself, because I didn't feel like I was as strong anymore. I didn't feel like I was invincible, which I know I'm not, but I always have that guard up. I always have that in place for me, for you, for the kids. I can take a lot of crap, and I can deflect it. I can wade through it, but when it's myself who's throwing the crap, when it's myself who is burying me and holding me responsible for things, it is really hard to come back from that if you don't have a stable voice helping to pull you through it. And I didn't, because I never talked to anybody about it. I mean, by the time it actually came out, we were 10 years into marriage, and our 8th kid had just been born.
Yep.
So, I mean, it definitely did some things. And I don't even think I started really coming into being me again until close to the 2nd year with Rita. That's when everything kind of started making more sense, and I was able to shed a lot of the crap that I was carrying that I really shouldn't have been carrying.
True.
But I didn't know.
And that's the thing, is you don't know what you don't know. And so that's where, shows like ours come in, and I quote Nick Saban all the time. Obviously, I'm a big Alabama fan. If you're watching this, congratulations to Alabama beating Auburn. That was fantastic. I dated the program there, but that's okay. Nick Saban has a saying that says, good people learn from their mistakes and great people learn from other people's mistakes. And that's part of why I wanted to share these things in this particular show, so that, no matter what point of the path you're on, you can look at what we've gone through and then maybe draw some lines of similarity to where you are in your relationship. And maybe you're earlier than where we are. Our kids are now 17 to 23. Maybe your kids are younger. Maybe they are 10 and under. Maybe they are 8 and under, 6 and under, etc. Well, now you have the benefit of listening to what we've been through, and now you can be 10 or 15 years ahead in your relationship of where we were. Because my expectation would be is that you, as you develop your relationship based on this podcast, that you supersede what Jeannie and I have done in our relationship, because that's what any great teacher wants, is for the students to achieve more. So I'll recap it really briefly, and then we can roll right out of this one, so that you have it. And how do you, steps to unifying your marriage? Number 1, identify, go back, reminisce, spend some time in that place of joy, understanding why you got married. Why did you marry that man, or why did you marry that woman? And then number 2, just locate yourself, get some awareness. Where are you guys now? What is the current experience like? And then number 3, what is it that you want, and how can you both get together there? And number 4, the final piece, is develop a check-in system with each other. If you need any help for that, you see the email at the bottom. If you're watching, it's Quincy@mvsmpodcast.com. So use the email. Use the email. Allow us to help you, and we will do just that. One thing I forgot to mention in the beginning of the podcast is we are going to put out in 25 the guide to a great marriage. It's our guide to a great marriage, something that's very comprehensive, something that's very practical, which is what I like to do. And if you want to know when that's going to drop, use the email for that too. And just let me know, Quincy@mvsmpodcast.com. Any final words, honey?
Nope.
All right, there you go. There are 4 steps for you to get more unity in your marriage. And I'm excited to hear your journey. So email me. And until the next time, that's Jeanne Moran. I'm Quincy Moran, and this is Man vs. Marriage, the podcast.